Welcome back to Automotive Supply Chain 2021 conference with the overall theme, Orchestrating New Experience. The concluding session is focused on intelligent logistics for responsive supply chains. This session would discuss on the following points like logistic service providers, augmenting auto supply chains to improve responsiveness, key enablers of auto supply chain control in future, evidence of successful use of artificial intelligence to achieve auto supply chain responsiveness. Happy to welcome and introduce Mr. Rahul Mishra, partner, A.T. Kearney. Rahul Mishra is a partner based in Kearney's Gurgaon office. His consulting and industry experience spans leading Indian and global companies, including two-wheeler, three-wheeler, passenger, and commercial vehicles, OEMs, as well as industrial good and process industries in India, the Middle East, Europe, and North America. As part of the firm's automotive, transportation, and industrial goods practices in India, he has led several large-scale programs delivering growth and market entry strategies, operations improvement, manufacturing excellence, supply chain transformation, and go-to-market programs. He has also advised the government on policy matters related to India's automotive industry, including the National Automotive Policy. Rahul leads work in emerging areas such as electric, shared, connected, and autonomous vehicles, and he tracks the application of technology in business through emerging digital technologies and adoption of Industry 4.0. He has authored thought pieces in the automotive and electric mobility industries and led the design of a digital transformation roadmap for the industry. Over to Rahul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhanumati, and good afternoon, everyone. It's both an honor and a privilege to be a part of this session. And of course, the topic is very relevant and pertinent for the automotive industry as we talk about the supply chain. The last few quarters, the last couple of years haven't really been very kind and have thrown a whole host of new challenges that the industry is seeing and grappling with. Right? And so maybe just to set the context, the way we plan out the next hour and a half or so is probably set the context by sharing some perspectives on how this entire space has been evolving. We've talked about supply chains being responsive. We're talking about them being resilient, adoption of technology, and a lot of changes that we are seeing in traditional supply chains. So what's happening on that? And with that, we'll quickly get into a panel discussion with an esteemed panel that we have together. We'll discuss some points of views in some aspects of the current situation, how technology, how some of the emerging digital thinking can impact the space. And towards the end of the session, by about 4:45, around 5-ish, by about 4:45, we'll open it up for questions and answers from the audience as well. So with that, let me just get into this, sharing some perspectives for today before we get into the panel discussion. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you very much. So a few pages on when you talk about intelligent logistics and responsive and resilient supply chains in the current context, right? But before that, a quick introduction. Dr. Bhanumati was kind enough to introduce me. A quick introduction about us as a firm. I lead the practice. I'm partner with Kearney. We were earlier known as A.T. Kearney, and in 2020, we decided globally to drop the initials A and T from our name, and then we are known as Kearney. We, of course, are more than 95 years old in the business now, global management consulting firm across 40 plus countries. significantly strong presence within the automotive space. If we talk about the industry, amongst the different industries that we work with, and a sizable presence across commercial vehicles, passenger vehicles, and a lot of the leading names are the clients that we would have served with. And specifically within the topic of supply chain, you'll see we are pretty much the gold standard when it comes to talking about the cutting edge thinking on supply chain. And therefore, that also reflects upon the amount of work that we do across industries and across sectors. And the page here gives you a snapshot of that. But without belaboring this further, a quick view on where we see this space evolve and some perspectives on the supply chain and why there is a need to think about responsive and resilient supply chains right now. If I talk industries in general and specifically automotive in particular, right, I guess what we see increasingly in the market are these four broad trends. And a lot of these have been highlighted even further over the last few quarters. In this calendar year itself, we've seen large OEMs, large businesses in India who operate a complex supply chain, both on, let's say, production parts, on the vehicles, on outbound spare parts and accessories side of it, and run not just a national but a truly global supply chain. All of them have been forced to go back to the drawing board and think about how do they need to think about their supply chain and the future readiness of their supply chain. And fundamentally, because the four factors that they're seeing is there's a significant amount of change in the shipper behavior. The overall operating model of the kind of players and the logistics service providers and the entities that are operating in the market has evolved, and there are different kinds of operating models and businesses that are available. There is a significant proliferation of technology. So every supply chain conversation these days starts talking about technology, use of data sciences, artificial intelligence, forecasting capabilities, planning and optimization capabilities, things like that. So a lot of proliferation of technology happening. And a lot of this is also moving towards thinking about next generation cognitive supply chains. And when I talk about cognitive supply chains, and this is something that a lot of industries are already leading the thinking, where the complexity of the network is large, the proliferation of SKUs are significantly large, the variability across the supply chain is significantly high, and therefore they need to think about building greater resilience, better sustainability in terms of the supply chain, are thinking about bringing together some of this forward-looking thinking in terms of a cognitive supply chain. I'll just talk about that in a minute. Just touching upon each of those four dimensions, I guess, and this will also set the tone for some of the discussions that we will do later on in the session today. The shipper behavior, some symptoms that we see with COVID happening and with a lot of international global supply chains getting disrupted. If we talk about the automotive industry, a significant increase in the domestic supply share of business started changing. There were OEMs who were dependent on Chinese and international supplies for things like alloy wheels, handlebars, electronics, and things like that. And to the extent possible, they have tried to shift the share of business to Indian suppliers. So the network, traditionally, the way it had looked, has been changing. The demand centers, of course, have evolved, right? The markets where the final product, either in terms of vehicle, parts, accessories, things would move. There are newer markets, newer consumption centers that are emerging, and therefore the demand centers have evolved. There is a significantly greater ask in terms of service levels, right? We are all experiencing, and we specifically talk about automotive and the news that we keep hearing, that 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 8 months wait time if we need to buy a new car, and issues around that. Add to it the complexity that comes in because of spare parts and vehicle off-road conditions and all those kind of issues. And therefore the kind of bad press, the customer angst that it creates, that has forced everyone to think about how do we push the service levels and get to the right service level in terms of offering the right customer experience there. A lot of the businesses, the introduction of products is a challenge that they need to prepare and think about. with newer powertrains, newer variants, newer business models coming in, and the proliferation happening over there. The pace at which new product introduction needs to happen, and they need to manage the increasing complexity over there, the variants that come in over there, that becomes important. With the industry also looking at making India a large export hub, large share of exports, and therefore going to markets beyond India and targeting other markets. And of course, the emergence of multiple channels, right? Not just the traditional channel, but on direct to customer, e-tailing platforms and all of that. And all of these need to, in the end state, need to coexist and work together in tandem to make sure that there is a well-oiled supply chain machinery that's running. The second aspect that we see is clearly from the changing operating model. And this has been more in the logistics player space. And I don't want to be preaching over here, but all of us have seen that how the traditional broker-led business transportation and the logistics model has evolved to different archetypes or profiles of players. There are full suite players looking at where there are traditional players and the new age players who are trying to use technology to disrupt things. There are specialized players coming in who got specialization in specific verticals or categories over there, or they are service line specialists. And then there are some players who've decided to operate on an asset light or a zero asset model and create more like an e-marketplace kind of thing. And each of these have had a different value proposition and have experienced different levels of success and challenges in the market. The third aspect that we've seen increasingly is the adoption of technology. And this again is not a new thing. Given the amount of thinking that we've been doing on digital industry 4.0, adopting next generation technologies in all parts of the value chain, supply chain is not untouched. And therefore, whether it is around managing and crunching large chunks of data through an AI, ML, or a data science algorithm, trying to bring in certain level of mechanization, robotics, improving accuracy, improving handling in our warehousing operations over there. Carbon footprint, ESG themes are now a topic in every boardroom. Every CXO and every promoter that we've been talking to have been talking about ESG and how can ESG start getting embedded in all parts of their business operations, and supply chain being one of them. And then some of the other areas around, whether it is the penetration of connectivity, looking at visualization technologies, looking at blockchain. Interestingly, with the need to drive end-to-end traceability, with the need for data and information to move across organizations, across OEMs, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, how can we manage some of these trust issues and leverage some of the new age technologies to ensure end-to-end traceability and reliability on that. And then all of this in some way is now culminating and kind of converging towards what we see as a capability, what we call within Kearney, we call it as a sense and pivot capability. And that essentially is becoming more like a three-part capability that's evolving. And this is something that increasingly in India, we had this conversation with the chip shortage that happened and the kind of disruption that almost all the automotive companies and OEMs had started seeing. Increasingly, this was a conversation that we've been having with them over the last 6 to 7 months in terms of, is there a way they could and potentially configure the supply chain to build stronger sensing capabilities? And when I say sensing capabilities, it is about getting early signals in terms of what's likely to change in the supply chain. Do they need to reconfigure, look at their operations differently? How do they bring the end-to-end execution and visibility capabilities, and how do they pivot their overall organization? Just a bit of detail on each one of these is, sorry, so we talked about these three parts: the sensing, the cognitive supply chain, and the pivoting capabilities. Well, the way this translates is globally, what we are seeing, very large complex supply chains now think about creating a very robust sensing platform which feeds on a whole host of different internal data, external data, brings all of that together, creates a very coherent and a comprehensive cognitive layer, which not just does the analytics, not just does the forecasting, but also helps them optimize, build scenarios, and support decision making. And then that feeds into the way the organizations need to run, either in terms of people, in terms of the kind of ecosystem partners, logistics service providers, third-party operators, etc., that they need to operate, or even the physical assets that they need to operate over there and the kind of partnerships that they would need to run. Just quickly, in the interest of time, I mean, some details around what this means is there's an overall supply chain strategy that feeds into this. This is the big layer which leverages emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, data sciences quite intensively. And what this will throw out is there would be early warning triggers, network configuration, what should be your factory to your dealership, to your outlet, or a tier 1 to tier 2 linkage. For example, how do we optimize part tourism and make sure that the network is right, model selection, delivered cost, service levels, a lot of those things, and take a lot of data and put all of this together. So just there are a couple of details on these technically how this happens. But just to conclude this in terms of what this means for the discussion that we are having and for a lot of our stakeholders, whether we are an OEM, whether we are a tier 1, tier 2 supplier, whether we are a logistics service provider and working with some of these clients to run the supply chain. What this means is, I guess, there is a need to look at end-to-end supply chain in terms of driving 3 sets of improvements or changes. There are structural changes, there are productivity changes, and of course, at the end of the day, every business looks at commercial improvement in terms of the money that they are spending. And there are aspects of looking at your network around route to market, around asset selection, the modal mix, the inventory, and the complexity that you're managing, not just for today, but even for the situation 3 years, 5 years down the line. And therefore build the scalability and resilience over there. And what we see and what we also recommend many of our clients is to drive a lot of this and to think about the hypothesis and how to drive some of these end-to-end capabilities. Maybe there's a way to look at this in terms of about 30, there are about 25 to 30 odd levers that one should look at. And each of these will either impact your end-to-end supply chain. For example, if I look at network optimization, whether it is delivered cost, factory depot location, vendor co-location, manufacturing postponement, and things like that, these would touch your end-to-end supply chain or part of the supply chain. And as you think about this, technology and end-to-end digital enablement and bringing in technology to enable a lot of these things will play an important role. With that, let me just pause over here. If there are any questions, please do share it in the chat box, and we'll take up these questions towards the end. But without further ado, let me introduce my fellow panelists who are there on the call today. So let me start with we have an esteemed panel over here. Let me start with my first panelist, who's Dr. Shubhajit Bose. Dr. Bose is the director and the head of strategic planning and analytics control at Interglobe Aviation. Dr. Bose brings a lot of experience, and he's an experienced leader with diverse and deep expertise in global management, growth and transformation across industries, with expertise in consulting, strategy, planning, business development, digital transformation, analytics, performance management, sales strategy, and several such areas. And he also brings in a rich experience across geographies, having worked across India, Middle East, Europe, US, China, and ASEAN countries. Dr. Bose has consistently demonstrated the ability to strategize, inspire, and lead teams and provide on-time, cost-effective, innovative business solutions as a consultant and both as a line manager in a $20 billion business. Dr. Bose, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Rahul.
My next panelist is Mr. Om Vijayvargiya. Mr. Vijayvargiya is the head of supply chain and logistics at Schaeffler India Limited. So Mr. Vijayvargiya is a qualified professional with total experience of 24 plus years He's an MBA and a BTech by qualification and has worked in areas of supply chain management, logistics, plant operations, and program management at automotive tier one industries like Schaeffler India, International Automotive Components, Metzeler Automotive, Lear Automotive, etc. Currently, Om is the head of supply chain management and logistics at Schaeffler India Limited. Based on his working experience with automotive tier one industries, Om brings a deep understanding and experience about supply chain requirements of automotive companies. He's recently implemented the warehouse consolidation through 3PL partners and has led several digitization initiatives. Om, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rahul.
My third panelist is Mr. Vishal Barnabas. Vishal, did I get the second name right?
Absolutely. Very few get it, but thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Barnabas is the Associate Vice President Automotive Engineering at Mahindra Logistics. Vishal has over 24 years of experience in operations management, lean management, project and change management, warehouse management, forging technology, contract negotiations, and so on. He has worked with companies like Bharat Forge Limited, Amforge Industries, Unipart Logistics, Vijay Logistics, and TVS Logistics. As we said, Vishal is currently heading the auto and engineering vertical within the Mahindra Logistics. Vishal, thank you for being with us. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
My next panelist is Mr. Atul Devdekar. Atul is the head of logistics at Endurance Technologies. He has worked in various roles at multiple organizations in indirect tax, logistics, warehouse management, inventory management with a total work experience of 29 years. He has a lot of rich experience and has been involved in setting up process and controls, decision-making, negotiation, business relations, and team building. Currently, Atul is handling the logistics operations through more than 10 warehouses. Atul, thank you for joining us. And our fifth and the last panelist is Mr. Sandeep Sharma. He's the head of supply chain management at Continental Automotive Components. Sandeep heads the supply chain management function of India and for Continental and for its automotive plants in the country. He has more than 3 decades of experience in the functions of operations, supply chain management, program management, global sourcing, new project management, and procurement, along with imports and exports. In his previous companies and in his previous roles, Sandeep has worked with Honeywell, Titan Industries, Escorts, Yamaha Limited, and he's joined Continental in 2012, and since then has been heading the supply chain for the business for all their India plants. Sandeep, welcome and happy to have you as part of the panel today.
Thank you. Thank you, Rahul. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So with that, let's get into this. So I did start with some opening thoughts in terms of where we see the supply chain moving. But let me probably start with my first question to Dr. Bose, to you. And this is more to set the context, and what I'm keen to understand is from your perspective, in the recent times, how do you see supply chains evolving, and whether it is an automotive supply chain or the broader definition of the supply chain, how have they changed in the recent past? And do you expect some of these changes to continue in the recent times? And are there more changes expected that we should be prepared for?
Sure. So, Rahul, when we talk of the changes in the current times, I think one important change that we observe, of course, from the lens of a logistics player, is that everybody is trying to build up resilience in their supply chains. Not to say it was not there earlier, but the focus is very, very high now. So it's not just about cost leadership, but also about what if, So from that perspective, the investments that are happening are more towards hedging from one source or 2 or 3 sources of supply to diversifying that. Adoption of technology, especially on the analytics front, is a trend that is emerging. And a lot of companies that we see are working towards building up something like a digital control tower, if you like, and whereby they are not only connecting the core OEMs and their suppliers, but actually tracing well into the second or third tier suppliers. Now, of course, that's work in progress for a majority of companies. Now, if I take the Indian context, but certain established auto companies, because I have had the opportunity to work with some of the large, auto giants in Germany. And so I've seen their supply chains, like, for example, from Joburg, there used to be shipments of spare parts, etc. So now what is essentially happening is two things. One is, and I think you very well covered that also in your presentation, is that one is the important aspect is that the real-time data visibility, so that you can really go for a semi JIT, so that you still retain the cost leadership in a competitive market. And B is you build up the resilience. The other aspect is the accuracy of the prediction models. Now that has a real impact, and we see a lot of companies using machine learning, leveraging the power of ML to really predict. And especially, if I talk of the German automobiles, the reference I took, they were actually using a lot of service records in terms of predicting the supplies, etc. So I think that helps everybody in the ecosystem, starting from the logistics provider to the OEMs to the auto companies themselves. So that is a trend that we see. And going forward, I think what is emerging is that we will be into some sort of a platform environment, which would be more like a plug and play, where every partner in the ecosystem could connect and form a logistic grid. So that is what we see happening as far as the changes that are being worked on. And it's of course about optimization that earlier used to happen, but reliance on technology has increased manifold. So in summary, I guess these are the changes that we are seeing. And advent of 5G, once that's commercially available, I think will change the game even further, because you can really leverage or unlock the value of IoT from movement from point A to B. So I think these are certain aspects which we are seeing from the multiple manufacturers, so to say, and auto included, of course. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any specific question or insight if you want to know. But broadly, I guess this is what we see as a trend.
Sure. Thanks for that. And I think quite a few aspects you've covered. Om, would you want to add something to that? And Vishal, maybe I can come to you after that. Take your thoughts if there's something. Om, you're on mute. Sorry.
Okay, so thanks, Rahul. And first of all, good afternoon, co-panelists, as well as audience. So let me start with what happened in the year 2020 and the first half of 2021. These were really a quite challenging and exceptional time. Automotive supply chain has seen a biggest disruption during this period, and its impact is still continuing. The timely availability of the automotive components is the biggest challenge, with all-time high freight charges. So we have seen all these things. So currently the supply chain is under great focus in any organization to minimize the impact on the bottom line. So this crisis has created a special focus on three things. One is agility, transparency, and the sustainability. And with the adoption of digitalization, that plays a key role in facilitating each of these responses. We observed in the last year that the SCM quickly adopt to changing the environment and shows resilience to the volatile demands of the Indian automotive market. For me, there are two outcomes of this crisis which has changed the automotive supply chain. First, this crisis has changed the risk profile and approach to risk management for automotive suppliers. Although everyone was doing the risk profile and risk management earlier also, but the kind of disruption we have seen during this period, it has completely changed to handle the risk. So, so the profile of the risk have changed. With that, our approach to managing the risk has also changed. The second outcome is that managing the supply chain during volatility of the demand pattern in the Indian automotive market. So that is more important. So we have seen like, okay, in January, February 2020, when, COVID situation was only the China crisis, we struggled to protect our supplies from China. And then suddenly India was in lockdown for 2 months and supply chain were completely shut down. In second half of 2020, the automotive industry worked in an overdrive mode to meet the customer needs and demand reaches its peak. The second wave of the COVID in India further slowed down the automotive production and recently the chip shortages. Managing this kind of a quick volatility in demand has become the special in last 1.5 years. Now, what changes expect in coming time actually? So one thing is sure that market will be more volatile in the future than in the past. So the agile and the flexible supply chain will be the decisive factor here. It will be about de-risking the business model without compromising on quality and service model. So what different actions we have taken? So one thing is that full-scale digitalization. When I say full-scale digitalization, it means track and trace from raw material to finished good conversion and delivery up to the customer's place. So SCM 4.0 will definitely play a big role over here. Then the second point which I would touch is like utilization of the data. So we know that in the supply chain management, we are generating a lot of data on a daily basis. And then, but actually what we are doing with this data, artificial intelligence is available and data is a new oil. So we have to utilize it and we have to, create a tool so that the faster decision making can take place. Then machine learning topic just now touched by the Dr. Saab. So the machine learning is like, this is a new thing where how we can avoid the more manual activities into the automatic processes basically. Then full-scale EDI connections between OEM, Tier 1 and Tier 2 so that, information should pass real time. It should not be dependent on the Excel sheets, on the emails or something like that. Then in last 1.5 years, we have seen that, okay, we were having a lot of dependency on the other countries where dependency on other countries is not so good. So localization is the new topic where we have to, generate our sources in India. And surely the Indian government is also supporting in Make in India process. And then last is like agile and flexible supply chain. So whatever disruption we have seen, but I believe that market will see more VUCA situation. So the agile supply chain will be a decisive factor in coming days. So that is my thought, Rahul, here.
Thanks. Thank you. Vishal, anything you'd want to add?
I think it's very aptly put forward by Dr. Bose and Om. In fact, you started your talk with talking about challenges, right? And the question about change in supply chains. So though we keep saying change is the constant, change has been happening all through our lives. But what the last 2 years has done to all of us, and I'll stay focused on the automotive segment I've been all through my life associated with, I think it has been a shakeup and quite a big one. What has also changed is not just the surrounding environment and supply chain, but the customer has changed his own perspective altogether. The complete preferences of the customers or the consumer has changed. Right from the looking at just mere availability of things to now expecting a great experience. And that has a cascading effect backwards. What also I don't want to push back again on, we've already seen an unprecedented slowdown right from 2019, even before the pandemic. The pandemic only was an icing over the already difficult time that we were facing. Yeah, the second wave and all of that. It's been challenging. But what's happened is the entire geopolitical dynamics have evolved, right? There are countries, now if you look at it in a global perspective, there is a lot of thought being given with respect to which countries to trade with or not to trade with certain countries. Those kind of dynamics are looking at reshoring back. New nations are evolving as auto hubs, especially for the Europe. If you see Morocco or the African countries, they are now started to develop as much more stronger automotive hubs for Europe, owing to all the challenges. We say chip shortage. That's taught us a lesson of how important it is to completely rethink about the strategy and not just stay, cost focused. Also, if you see the political environment, how the impact, there was a recent study which I saw about Afghanistan could have been the highest deposits of lithium. And the way the changes in the powertrain, we are looking at a quick shift from ICE to EVs, right? So that's something that is going to impact differently the way we think, the advent of EVs, the connectivity in the vehicles, autonomous vehicles. And then everybody has, I couldn't stress more on the importance of digitization across the value chain, real-time data, all of that. I think this is what has changed. But what's really been the challenge is the pace at which it's changing and the agility that we need to look at when we have to come in pace with the change that's happening, right? Now I look at it from our perspective as a service provider. We need to really align constantly with the requirements of an OEM. OEMs are already challenged in the market with competition. They're challenged with expectations from the consumer. We've had situations where you launch a new product and you get record-breaking bookings. But do we really end up delivering on those bookings? Nobody talks about it later on as the number of cancellations that happen and why they happen. It's not because the product was not good. It's because we cannot deliver. And the customer is now impatient. They can't wait 3 months, 6 months. You mentioned the waiting times have gone up, but so has the patience adversely gone down. And therefore, it is now more than any time very, very important for us to look at various aspects of how we optimize. It's now more than any time I feel personally lean, which is a very age-old philosophy. How do we bring on board very strong lean tools, lean technologies, even within the supply chain ambit, which was very strongly envisaged in the manufacturing. When we move from manufacturing and it comes out of the line, the cars, from there on, not necessarily all these process of lean and everything is really looked at that strongly. But now is the time where we as an organization also have started looking at optimization, at efficiencies, productivities, and having processes detailed to the last core. And digitization, yes, I think Dr. Bose spoke very aptly about it. Also mentioned how much of real-time data is going to make a difference. We cannot wait. We need to look at cloud-based technologies. Global supply chains are connected. And unless we look at digitization, which is universally available to everybody in real time, it's not going to help us improve further. It's going to be a challenge otherwise.
Sure. No, very pertinent points, and you do bring out some of the pain points that our clients, especially the OEMs, are experiencing. But just taking cue from that one, and Atul, we've been talking about automotive clients and some of what we hear. We heard one perspective, but are there any other top of the mind, any other supply chain challenges that we keep hearing from our automotive clients? Any asks that our clients have been putting on to us in terms of how they would want to configure and operate their supply chains?
I think if I may just come back in, a very important shift in the way the automotive customers are now looking at supply chain. You know, it's a complete move. We normally are a country which recognized logistics services as a transactional service. Either it's a warehousing requirement or a manpower requirement or a transport requirement. Now, more and more, I could see through this pandemic and through as we evolved, all the customers and clients keep asking, what is the value addition? Where is the value addition that you are going to bring onto our supply chain? What is it that you're going to help us save? How do we become more competitive? It's a competition of supply chains more than products, the way it seems nowadays, right? The more agile and the more lean the supply chain, the better your products reach to market is going to be, right? And now, the more and more I interact with them, they are now talking about a complete end-to-end integrated solution package. They say, we are in the business of making automobiles, let's focus on that. Whatever is required to be done on the side of distribution and management of all of that. And that now brings a lot of owners and service industry to evolve sharply, to become more agile, be more flexible. You know, I think we all mentioned that it's a radical departure, I think, from the traditional thinking. Earlier, it was just completely focused on reliability, whether your service is reliable, whether it's consistent, what is the cost. I think that's a shift that is really encouraging, and that's a shift we need to embrace and come up to the expectations of the OEMs, and that's what we're all gearing up for.
Right. No, very apt. And on that note, my next question is both to Atul and Sandeep, and because in some way, as where they are operating, they are sandwiched between the supply chain complexities on both the ends. And also there are a number of these problems and supply chain asks that keep getting thrown to them. So Atul, my question to you earlier was that are there some of these pulls and pressures that you keep hearing from your customers?
Yes. Thank you for giving opportunity. And you had raised the right question to right person. I think so. Because we are real sandwich in between the OEMs and the service providers. And every time service provider expecting some higher money, but OEM is expecting higher service without giving money. I will give one example, like this fuel cost has been increased drastically last 1.5 years. But no OEM is willing to give the voluntarily. We need to beg them, we need to submit various proposals. Then again, with this proposal also, they want to negotiate. So this is the big challenge. Vishal said that they are accepting some cost. Yes, some change is done there because of this beyond capacity of the any middleman. That's why they are also understanding. And with the pandemic, the cash flow has been drastically impacted on the such small companies or medium-based companies, because all the inefficiencies they are pushed on with auto component suppliers. Mr. Sandeep will agree with me. They are saying you need to maintain inventory 10 days, and suddenly one day they are shutting down their production without any information. So that's why we need to carry all inventory. We need to cover the inventory insurance. Then we need to control on all the FIS and PPO base. So that's why every time I'm thinking where this to present, but you had given this chance to me. But as far as the subject of this intelligence logistic, I have some suggestions here where I'm saying that there are a lot of industry, like bank industry, when ICICI Bank has come in India, 1990. And then bank was very confidential institution. And people were going bank, they are getting their personal balances and they are working on that. But right now, we are used to get SMS from bank. Your money is credited, money is debited. So our intelligence logistic should be like that. If your consignment reach, not reach, like Amazon started. We are able to track our consignment. Whatever consignment we are booking, we are able to track. And this is available with the very lesser cost. But because of the attitude of OEM, we could not able to implement. If we join to work from OEM and auto ancillary is there, this is easily possible. This is hanging fruit available for the logistic improvement. Like we are saying in the airline company, when there is they are saying no announcement zone is there. And when there is something change in their positioning and boarding, they are giving immediate SMS. And all passengers, around thousands of passengers taking actions, and they are without any disturbance, they are able to take. Like OEM also to develop something information system in advance. They are reducing their plan, they are doing something. But somehow this is not available. This to be developed with joint effort. If this is the such type of improvement is done with the OEM and NATO ancillary, this will help to logistic improvement, and this will definitely reduce the cost. What Vishal is expecting validation, this will definitely give validation, because whatever cost we are incurring, OEM is thinking we are not recovering from them, but directly indirectly this is going to load on their pricing. So this is joint work of the OEMs and auto component industries. I'm handing over to Sandeep.
Yeah. Thank you, Atul. I fully endorse whatever you said, and Rahul used this wording very aptly, that we are in a very peculiar situation. We are directly sandwiched between our customers, OEM customers, and our suppliers. I am talking in particularly in context of semiconductor chip shortages, because for the last 1 year or so, these semiconductor global manufacturers are ruling the roost. So more or less, when we go to them and ask them, they ask us to place the order for next 2 years, place the firm order for next 2 years. Whereas from our Indian OEM customers, we are not able to get the visibility of our demands for next more than 4 weeks. So there is a complete contradiction here. And so we have to manage these contradictions. Second point, which I would like to bring in here, is that our expectation of our OEM customers is very, very high. Like, China power outage happened. Texas Instrument power outage happened in Austin, Texas. So they would like us that within 1 day or 2 days, can you give us all the components which are getting impacted globally? So this is the kind of expectations which we need to meet. And that is why, like every other fellow panelist also mentioned, that use of AI and ML and, visible and digital supply chain, and how we have to build in agile and responsive supply chain is of paramount importance. So yes, these are the 2-3 challenges which we face from our customers. One, and the last but not the least, again in context of chips, is that they want our tier 1 suppliers to give complete assurance that when you will supply us the parts. But the fact of the matter is, they also know in hearts of their hearts that no one is clear for next 7 days position. Leave aside next 2 months position.
Yeah.
So there are many dichotomies like this happening, and yes, we have to strike a right balance between our customers and suppliers, and tread this path very carefully.
True, and I think it all starts from building robust demand planning and at least forecasting capabilities, which is not just 1 week, 10 days, but beyond that, and then cascading it down in the supply chain. But while we are on that topic, on the chip shortage, maybe a quick question that, and would be good to just get some quick comments from some of you, is now that we've all seen the way this problem unfolded, is there something that you think could have been done differently, or going forward, is this something that companies should do differently to just configure and not get into this kind of a situation again? Sandeep, maybe you might want to respond to that.
Yeah. I can dwell upon this. What our organization has done is that we are putting more and more focus on complete S&OP process. Demand and supply planning process has become of very, very importance, great importance we are giving to, and with this, what is happening, we are also trying to secure supplies of our global semiconductor supplier base for at least next 18 months or so minimum. So this is the shift which I have seen, and we are also trying to get the visibility across their back end and front end, although it is a difficult proposition because they don't give that visibility quite easily. But still, we are trying to get that where does the wafer manufacturing happens, where does the assembly gets manufactured, assembly happens, where the testing happens. So we are trying to get the complete visibility, which I think we were not trying to get it earlier. Let me admit this upfront. So this is the renewed focus. This shortages, we have this lessons learned.
Sure. Maybe we could take one more comment. Om, would you want to comment on this, on the chip issue? You'll need to unmute, Om.
Okay, so when we talk about like the chip shortage issue happened and how we can get the early signal of this kind of a problems. So let me start with because chip shortage is recent problem, but disruption we have seen from last 1.5 years, especially when we talk about like a COVID pandemic here, then after the Suez Canal issue happened, and then the second wave of COVID happened in India, and then now the chip shortages. So chip shortages, yes, definitely badly affected the automotive industry and its supply chain. But as you asked that, okay, how we can get the early signal and how we can mitigate this risk, then I would say that, yes, now it is the time to develop this kind of a capabilities in the supply chain who can help us to, understand that what is going to happen. So already you talked about the digitalization and the AI and other things. When we have data available, we have a technology available. So why we cannot develop this kind of a system where end-to-end supply chain can be tracked, okay? And then it will give us the signal that, okay, something is happening wrong. Chip shortages can be one good study for all this actually. And, we know that this chip shortages has not happened suddenly within a day or a week. It took time. So if we could have been a right system in place, which can tell us that chip production has been either cut down somewhere or some automotive chip capacity has been transferred to some other products. So then it can give us a clear signal that something is going to happen, shortage is going to happen. So I just want to mention that technology is available. Now it is the time to integrate these technologies and system so that it can help us in transfer the information on a real-time basis so that right decision could take place at right time. And now we have to put more focus on system integration, digitalization side, basically. That is my point, Rahul.
Understood. Thanks. Just mindful of time as well. We've talked about many of the challenges now, probably shifting gears and talking about how is it that some of us in the industry needs to be responding to this. And maybe two aspects that I would want to touch upon in the remaining time is one, to get to know a bit more about how our logistics service providers and players in the logistics space gearing up to address some of these challenges and pain points that we keep on hearing. And maybe the second question later on, and probably the last topic of discussion would be around technology, and if there's any aspect of technology we haven't discussed so far. But Dr. Bose, coming back to you, in terms of the response and the readiness and how logistics service providers are kind of gearing up towards all these challenges and complexity. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you see, Rahul, now the point here is from a logistics standpoint, every logistic player of formidable size does their own demand forecast in terms of, the various products that they carry. But I guess the challenge that comes up is that when you forecast demand, from a logistics prism, what happens is you are using historical data to forecast. Now, the challenges that the other co-panelists did mention about changing customer behavior or black swan events happening, that can only come from data points or sources which are directly connected to the customer buying patterns or the production processes of respective auto companies or the OEMs. Now, unfortunately, that visibility, none of the transport service providers have access to. So I think that is, that's what I was trying to allude to during the first part of the discussion, that it's high time that we look at it from an ecosystem standpoint, as opposed to a particular company or a center of excellence within a particular company. Because that has been my experience working with different players is while some vertical or some department really has excellent capability in terms of demand forecast, etc. Unfortunately, that piece does not get horizontally translated into an enterprise-wide view or even an ecosystem-wide view. And that is where the real challenge lies, because unless you do that, the entire supply chain, you can't really leverage the benefit. And that's why I was talking about the digital control tower, where it's like a farm to fork concept, where you have a real-time visibility of the entire movement, available to the ecosystem partners. Of course, you can limit it basis security requirements, etc. But at least, till the time you have that end-to-end visibility, it is very difficult to optimize any supply chain, even within the auto industry, optimize it to the fullest extent, because you will always end up building up buffers of inventory across various layers, simply because you don't want to be in a stockout situation. So the only way you can do that is when you have the confidence of real-time visibility, both upstream and downstream. So that I think is of critical importance. And as I mentioned, that it is coming to an environment where one should really look at a platform where it should be like a plug and play for the supply chain aspect, where the different companies within the ecosystem should be able to connect and have at least a B2B visibility to smoothen out this process, because COVID has sort of taught us the lesson, right? And it's high time that we really look at it holistically. Now, one of the challenges which I see on that is the time dimension. Now, typically what happens is that any organization, it is much faster to build up a center of excellence on a specific vertical, as opposed to building it up at an enterprise scale or the ecosystem scale. So naturally, they end up developing a center of excellence, but that becomes a little myopic in terms of the overall aspect. So nobody is having the canvas view, and I think that becomes very, very important. So I think that is the future. Whether any technology giant comes up to do that, or a startup companies, a lot of startup companies are trying to do that in the logistics space. But that is the future, I think. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for that. Yeah. So we did talk about technology quite a bit, but question to you, Vishal, is that we realize there's a certain role of technology that we've talked about, that we've heard the fellow panelists talk about so far. Is there anything more? Is there a larger role of technology that we need to think about? And are there any other enablers that we should be mindful of when we think of building these capabilities? Just unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I think throughout the discussion, interestingly, we have brushed upon technology a number of times, because I think that now becomes paramount. Interestingly, we talk very little about it, and Atul just mentioned the name Amazon, right? We all know it's a global behemoth with supply chain that works really like clockwork. I mean, they redefine standards every time for us. And by the time we catch up with them in terms of trying to reach them, it's already gone to the next generation, right? So I keep telling my team, it's an interesting thing that we use as a learning for ourselves. So whenever we go and talk to some of our customers, in fact, I meet Atul many times on a professional relationship, and we say that this is the new thing that we are doing. But then the same customers are also customers to Amazon at home, and they quickly come out and say, no, but can't we do like this? Can't we get this kind of real-time information? So that's what's challenging us to really look at emerging technology in a big way. And now, what we have been doing in the last 4 to 5 quarters, 6 quarters, since the pandemic really shook our thought process up, is to invest deeply into emerging technology. There are a number of aspects that we are now trying to industrialize within the organization. There are a number of them which are in test environments, but we continue to invest, and I think one of the interesting things that we have been working on now, we're trying to scale it up across all our operations, is the use of IoT, and specifically to monitor inventories or to automate the stock reordering. That's where we try to take out the human. Now, if you look at what Amazon's doing also at most of the fulfillment centers, it's not just humans who operate fulfillment centers anymore. There is a lot of technology intervention. There's humans and robots all working together, right? More and more, Amazon is now shifting humans from working to just monitoring and interventions as processes are getting completely automated for them. And that's exactly the next step for us. And therefore, it's key for providers like us to start investing today, because we've got to be ready with absolute newest technologies. We heard a lot about predictive analysis, and even Om mentioned it's not about getting the past data and evaluating what's happening next. But then again, I'm going to keep going back to this example of Amazon, because while I was hearing them, I was correlating to. So Amazon can't depend on past data. They track you everywhere and every which way to try and make that delivery a 24-hour delivery for you by tracking and forecasting your buying pattern. And it's not just one person. There are millions of customers across the globe that they do that with. So there is a huge technology usage. This big data. I'm not very intelligent on that subject to talk more, but all I know that's really helping them. And what we need to answer for ourselves. Automotive is quite different. We say we are differently poised, but I think it's not different, because the guy who buys the automotive is also a huge customer of Amazon, and he's getting Amazon touch him every single day. And then he comes to an automotive dealership and expects something similar. The entire buying platforms are changing. People are moving to online. I won't be surprised when you can shop for cars online tomorrow. It's not far away, and therefore it's very, very important for us to focus on all of that. We are also trying to do some experimentation on blockchains, how we can replace all our slow and manual processes, how we can strengthen traceability, right? So there is a lot we need to do and a lot we can learn. I think like it said, if you want to excel, find somebody who's excelling and copy him. And Atul just brought out that name, which really excited me. Amazon is leading the way on this. So there's a lot we can learn from them.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, there are other industries who are setting the example and giving customers the experience, which people start demanding in our industry, and naturally we already see some of the OEMs going extremely heavy on the digital sales channel and kind of deprioritizing the traditional dealerships. But I see some questions also coming in my chat box right now. I want to keep some time for that, but probably just the last question across the panel is that we've talked about technology, but organizationally, in terms of organization capability, do you think are people ready to manage this kind of complexity and the future, the agile, the resilient supply chain that we are talking about? And if there's one thing that you believe companies should do, what would that be? And maybe I could start with Sandeep and Atul, and then the rest of the panel. Sandeep, you want to just put some closing comments on organizational readiness and one imperative?
Yeah, yes, Rahul. So I think there is a worldwide data that in automotive industry, only 1/3 of the team members need reskilling. So this data is not far away from our own organizations also. And we have decided that we are going to reskill our supply chain management team. because of the advent of so many technologies barging into our, and as we compare ourselves to our German parent company, we see that the technologies which globally Continental is working on, there are five major pillars. One is geolocation, geofencing. Second one is big data analytics. Third one is AI demand forecasting. Fourth one is additive manufacturing. And fifth one is automotive RPA and automated guided vehicles. And you will be surprised that out of these, two we have already implemented in our Bangalore plant. One is the RPA, 6 projects we are doing on RPA. So we have started implementing 2 projects right now. And cobos and robos and automated guided vehicles also we have implemented. So gradually it is not right to say that enable to adopt these technology, reskill ourselves very fast, and we have to adopt to these changing technologies very fast. This is the only concluding remark I will put in, because only then we can have this resilient supply chains, which all other fellow members also pointed out.
Sure. Thanks, Sandeep. Atul, any thoughts?
I would like to add that I would like to reduce the customer effort on the getting data, getting information from our side, and simultaneously we are trying to reduce the effort on the getting vehicle, placing vehicle, tracking vehicle, and feedback from vehicle, then bill passing of the transporter. Because this is also one of the pain area of the logistic industry. Getting service, we are very eager to get service, but we are not eager to pay the service provider. That's why we are taking care of this aspect also. So we had made an integrated software where we can place vehicle from the our software, getting vehicle from software. The vehicle is getting traced fully here, fully destination, and once it is reached to destination, we are thinking that we are in process to pass the bill automatically of service provider, and then we will accept the digital bill from these people. With this, we can trace the consignment, we can pay on time to service provider, and if there is something losses on the damages and or some shortages, we can recover from the service provider on time. And periodically, this data will be available to customer also, so that he will also understand which goods we are loaded in which truck, whether it is reaching or not reaching on time, what is our stock level, and we are transparently sharing our data, our system to our customer. This is our aim to reduce our customer effort and build customer confidence on us. And this has given very good sign to us. That's why our SOV also getting increased day by day. Our response with customer also getting increased, and we are very happy. There are some small effort initial period, but now there is no follow-up cost to us. This is unwanted cost which is avoided. Like somebody was saying, we need to give validation from supply chain. This is one of the validation. We are reducing the cost of the follow-up from the service provider also and from the customer also.
Om, anything further to add to what Atul mentioned?
Yeah. So Atul and Sandeep has talked about the technology actually. So I would not touch the technology topic right now. That okay, because they already talked. And as Atul just mentioned, that clearing the bill is also really important for transporter also, as well as for the customer also. So recently, machine learning technology we have adopted, where service providers are directly uploading their bills on the system. System is checking the bills against the agreed rates and passing it, or directly going to finance and clearing it. So a lot of manual checks we have removed. So rather than not talking about the technology, let me say how to increase the agility in the system, because to create the agile and resilient supply chain to handle this disruption, it is very important that how to create the agility. So first is innovation and digitalization, and then second is develop the right set of the people with the right skill set. That is very important for us, and organization has to create the vision for the same. These things cannot happen automatically. top-down approach is required for that. Top management has to decide that, okay, these kind of digitalization activities, we have to implement it, and right vision has to create, right set of people has to hire, and then give them the decision-making power that, okay, yes, you can implement it. This is the way we can do it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. And in fact, you also answered one of the questions that we had from Colonel Rajiv Kaushik, who did ask this exact question, that there are a lot of panelists who've highlighted the requirement of our supply chain to be agile. But could we dwell upon this a bit more and elaborate upon this aspect and talk about what needs to be done, what is the industry doing, especially with respect to capability building in this area. So hopefully that, for Colonel Kaushik, that answers the question. Just moving on, Vishal, and then Dr. Bose. Vishal, any closing thoughts, both on the capability and if there's one thing that stakeholders need to do?
So I think there is no one thing, but yeah, closing thoughts, I'll just take 6 seconds. I'm going to make 6 comments, which I personally believe and we really focus on as the key trends that are driving transformation today in the automotive supply chain. And I began with saying the first and foremost is changing customer experience. So that's something that we need to drive upon, from availability to an experience that they're looking for. Then there is another new development that we look at and we are trying to work and evolve, is the increasing channel complexity. Today, the online channel, the omni-channel and all are trying to evolve quite a bit, though they are nowhere close on the automotive side, but I'm sure someday something would be used through all these channels, could be spares, could be something. And the other point for service providers specifically is the car OEMs now looking at integrated services. And
I think we just lost Vishal's feed.
Or technology that's shaping the supply chain operations completely.
Sure, Vishal, thanks. We lost you for a couple of seconds, but I guess we got the message.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Bose, over to you.
Yeah, look, I mean, from a reskilling standpoint, I think 2 things. One is, I believe that any transactional activity will eventually be taken over by technology, and that's pretty much given. So it's about supervisory roles rather than actually executing it at a transaction level. So reskilling, especially when we talk of things like machine learning, where, especially in cases of unsupervised learning, you really don't need a human being to teach the machine. So the machine teaches by itself. And as we move further into areas like deep learning, what will happen is, I think, it is the area of work will pretty much be on the strategic end. So a big picture thinking from a reskilling standpoint. Equally important will be customer services and perception management, which it will be very difficult for technology to overtake. And I think one needs to really, reskill on those aspects of perception management, customer services, strategic thinking, etc., and supervisory roles. But as and when you keep on automating, eventually the robots will supervise instead, or at least a cobot. So, that is where I guess we are heading towards. And every company will want to be a cost leader, will want to be the most efficient. And obviously, on a transactional front, a machine will do a consistent error-free job. So, what it can't do is connect the dots and the big picture. So where we will require skilled people. So I think that is where my thought in terms of what the future holds from a reskilling standpoint. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And on the technology side, we just want to acknowledge there's also a comment from Mr. Anish Nair, who does talk about some of the technology adoption in the comments I can see, where he talks about a possible scenario where technologies like blockchain can be used to connect OEM suppliers, logistics companies, and they are knitted together in such a well manner that data and some bit of foresighting capability and technologies like AI prompt triggers and give early warning indications for lags, things like force measures, etc., and basically prompt the businesses to think about a plan B and start reacting to that in a much more responsive manner. But on that note, I think great. It's been a fantastic conversation. We all, I guess, my takeaways from this is clearly that the supply chains had been evolving, but when we look at automotive and the kind of time that we've seen over the last 2 years, the complexity, the kind of challenges, the kind of need for having much more responsive, resilient supply chains have increased. We did talk about building in capabilities in terms of sales and operations planning, S&OP processes, building in better forecasting capabilities. But at the core of all of this, technology would play a very critical role. Not just the way we've used technology and some of the softwares and off-the-shelf tools historically, but bringing together a lot of data, a lot of analytical capabilities, and building the capability for the organization. But the intervention that we do on the technology side, what we also hear, needs to be supported by the right set of organizational capability, with people getting skilled, getting trained to manage the complexity, work with the scenario that's needed, work with the asks around the service levels and the stakeholder pulls and pressures that are being experienced. And at the end of the day, all of this would be possible, as Om was mentioning, that there needs to be a significant amount of sponsorship, top-down push, buy-in, and involvement of each stakeholder to make this a very well-oiled machinery and create a truly responsive and a resilient supply chain. On that note, let me close the panel discussion, and I'd really want to thank all my fellow panelists. It's been absolutely enriching, enlightening to get engaged in this conversation with you, get your points of views. There's a lot of good points, a lot of perspectives to share, and maybe that also sets a tone and get a lot of the attendees on the call to think about how should they think about some of these problems and challenges within their organization construct. On that note, let me hand it back to the CII team. Thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Rahul. It was really engaging. And
thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, Rahul. And
Thank you.
Very well conducted.
Thank you, Dr.
Thanks to all my fellow panelists.